Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to this week's installment of This Week in Svelte. As your usual hosts are preoccupied, I've been tasked with running the show this time, hosting from Tokyo, hence the time slot change. My name is Martin Krishnadeputra, but you may know me as Gregor Folzer from the Svelte Discord. For today's agenda, we have an interactive changelog, a community showcase, and questions and answers. For those of you joining us live, we will be collecting questions from YouTube chat for both last week's changes and the community showcase, and questions will be answered after the showcase. We will focus on showcase questions first, and then we can talk about any changelog questions after the showcase questions. Let's start with the interactive changelog. So this time around, instead of just showing you a list of changes, we decided to tweak things a little bit. This might be a one-off. We're still trying the format. And let's see. Since the last week, since version Next 57, Svelte 5 has added nesting, CSS nesting support, and where support as well. The where query is also supported. So we can see here, this is the child.svelte file. It's in runes mode. It's already supporting nested CSS and as well as the where query. The where query here is just in the output. Starting from Svelte 5 Next 62, we can also export state or derived runes. These are only reactive across runes, so you'll have to use them inside another Svelte runes file or a .svelte.js file. So for example, svelte.js, that would be fine as well. So here we can see the child is has its own count. It's the usual state derived. Doubled is exposed and count is exposed and increment is exposed. You'll see here a warning regarding the scope. Even though this warning is here, it's just telling you that if you try to use this in normal JavaScript files, it's not going to be reactive because it doesn't have the Svelte compiler work on it, of course. You can see here, if I increment inside the child, everything outside the child, the parent, is also reactive. How is this happening? Because we tell us, let's make an empty variable called child, and we're telling the Svelte compiler, hey, this is going to be a state. Just go track whatever this is. We bind to it, and then after that, we just make sure that after child exists, we can access the count or the doubled. And of course, the increment is also accessible. Here, we can use the parent increment instead, and it works just as well. And then starting from Svelte 5 Next 65, we also can use content editable without having to type true, because this is how it works with regular HTML. As long as it's empty or it's true, it's effectively content editable. So bad parts, judge my vow. And that was it for this week's changelog. The rest of the changes you can check out yourself, but they're mostly fixes, bug fixes. SvelteKit also had some changes, but they were also mostly bug fixes. So, we will be having a community showcase for Agnes UI, which is a library that provides configurable TypeScript widget factories featuring both headless widgets and ready-to-use ones that utilize Bootstrap CSS. With support for Svelte, React, and Angular, Agnes UI enables you to create consistent and visually appealing UI across your projects. Please welcome a principal engineer at Amadeus, Florin Exbright.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. So, yeah.
How are you feeling?
Martin. Fine, and you?
All right.
All
So,
right. So,
we're going towards the community showcase today. I'll let you have the stage. Feel free to let me know if you need some help.
okay. Thank you, Martin. So, yes, my name is Florence Braia. I'm a principal engineer at Amadeus, and I'm very pleased to be live with you to present Agnos UI. So, like it was said, Agnos UI is a multiple widget libraries that is actually based on the same core, which is framework agnostic. And we have widgets in 6 flavors, so free headless in Svelte, React, and Angular, and free Bootstrap 1 using the headless in Svelte, React, and Angular. The core is using a lot the Svelte principle, mostly for the reactivity part and the directive one, and provide a factory function for each component. This is why we think Svelte is so amazing. We can even apply the Svelte principle in a framework agnostic library, which is so before we go deeper into the widget and utils, I want to give you a bit of context. In my company, we have a design system in Angular based on another widget library that we maintain, which is ng Bootstrap. I'm going to show you ng Bootstrap. So this is the library we are also maintaining. It is on Bootstrap. We have like 2 million downloads a month for this library. And we wanted to when Svelte went out, so we were kind of jealous not to be able to use Svelte, and also about the reactivity system of the stores of Svelte. So we wanted to bring to Angular the reactivity first. This was before, of course, Angular signals, and what we did at the time is create Tanso, which is a framework agnostic reactive library, so based on the Svelte stores, with a few other features. Small anecdote, the guy who started this with us left the company for Google, where he worked on the Angular signals. After this, we decided to make like a ng Bootstrap version 2.0, but framework agnostic, and using this amazing reactivity that inspired us, so that we can have our design system multi-framework. And this is basically Agnos UI. Agnos UI is the widget libraries, but the idea is to use this for our design system. Okay, so you can basically pick your flavor. Okay, you have the Svelte one, and you have the list of the components that we are currently improving and the documentation part. Okay. This is really amazing now what you can do nowadays in a framework agnostic way. We regularly have example of other works like this. We have NeoDrag to library to do drag and drop. That is kind of using the same directive system as we do. But we also can see TanStack with the TanStack tables, TanStack form. That is like Agnos UI using his own library, signals library. So what I'm going to do first is explain a bit of Tanso, which is the reactive library, so the signal library. So it follows the Svelte stores contract. I think you know about it, but you can find it on the Svelte documentation. Because it follows this, it means that we can use Tanso stores inside the as if it was a Svelte store, basically in the template, for example. So we have the type documentation of Tanso here, where we are explaining how to use it, what it brings. Okay, so with all the different API. So it's basically like a Svelte store. We have the writable, we have the readable, we have the derived, and on top of that, we have a few utils as readable and as writable to be able to add some API to our stores. And the differences is that the stores that we generate, for example, the writable, it's also a function that you can call to get the value. And also what we added on top of the functionality from Svelte stores is also a batch. We want to be able to run multiple change on stores without the subscriber to be notified. And only at the end of the batch, the subscriber would be notified. And this batch is very helpful. It's solving us all the diamond dependency issue that we could have in the code. And there's some of the diamond dependency issues that are not solved by the store. On top of that, we have added a computed. So a computed is a way to, it's a derived, basically, but with the idea that, let me show you. it's a derived, but with the idea that the dependency are automatically computed. So when you are using another store in the computed is automatically registering, subscribing to those stores to know when they are changing, and is computing again the value when it needs to. So those store signals, they're synchronous, they are lazy in terms of computation, and they are framework agnostic also, so we can use it in the core and use it, of course, in every flavor of our component. We have an article on how to use the Tansu store if you want to read more in our blog part. So the core of Agnos UI is using everywhere those stores. This allows us to create the logic of the state in a declarative way, which is easier to maintain and understand for us. So let me show you an example. So here it's in the pagination widget. So in the pagination, for example, here we are computed if the next button should be disabled out of if it is actually the last page and if the whole pagination is disabled or not. Okay, so we use those computed everywhere in our factory components to generate the actual state of the component. Another feature that we use in the core are the directive system of Svelte. Okay, so let me show you a bit. So what basically we are doing is for every utils or every factory function, we create usually directives. So directives are just a function that takes an HTML element as first parameter and options as second parameters. And those functions should return an object with at least an update function and a destroy function. It's the life cycle that has been put in place by Svelte for the directive. And in Svelte, we are using, of course, the use keyword to apply this directive in our component. And it's very, very efficient. We use this everywhere to be able to plug the agnostic logic into the component. So. So what we are doing within Agnos UI, what we are providing a lot of services that are using basically this directive system. So we have services for focus track, we have a portal services, we have a navigation manager, we have intersection observable utils, all without any external dependencies and very simple to use. On top of this, we have a position utils using floating UI. Plus, we have our own mechanism for transition animation, with which you can create your own animation using CSS class or not. So this is the utils I'll talk about. And then we have in transition part, we have all the utils about animation. Okay, and we have already provided the bootstrap animation also that we are using in our bootstrap components. Okay. So let's have a look at how we can use them with the example of the documentation with the focus track. So the focus track documentation is explaining a bit what we have. So we have a create as focus factory for the utils. Okay, that is returning a directive that you can apply to an element to track if the focus is on one of the elements or one of the descendants. And it has this as focus signals, okay, that you say if the focus is actually among the elements. Okay, so for example, here in our case, we create the utils. We use the utils. We get the directive and we get the as focus signals. And within the directive, we can apply it to a container, and then we can know if the focus is inside the element or not, inside the container or no longer inside, and which element has the focus. Okay. And it is as simple as to use as calling a function and putting the directive using the use keyword inside the template. In Svelte, the usage of the directive is straightforward with the use keyword, like I said, but in React and Angular, we provide utils to use the directive in a simple way. So in React, for example, for the focus track, you can see the example here. So we have the create as focus, so it's the same directive provided in a core, okay? And then we have the directive, and we have created this use directive to be able to use the directive, okay? Instead of having the use keyword that we don't have in React, of course, we're using this use directive. It's providing us with a ref that we need to apply on the container. Okay? And in Angular, we have the same kind of things. We call the function to create the API, and then we have this directive EU use to apply the directive to the container. Okay, so we code one and we apply in every framework the same logic. Let's have a look at a component who use a lot of them. So the modal is using, for example, the focus trap as well as the portal, and so that we can stack modal, plus the animation system for both the backdrop and the modal. So let's have an example of the. So I have a button to launch the modal. So if I press tab, I can go to the modal. Press enter, I can open it. And if I press tab, I have a focus trap. So the focus is going to the to the modal, and I can press enter, and I have the response of the modal. Okay. And this code, within this code, we are using the utils that, for example, the transition utils to apply the animation that we saw when the modal is opening. All our utils are customizable with props. For example, for the navigation manager, you can provide your own key mapping, even your own action to execute. Okay. So let's have a look at the manager quickly. So here I'm pressing arrow right, and I'm going for different element. We are even dealing with right to left element. If I'm pressing left here, I'm going there. Okay. Let's close a bit all this. Okay. And this is applied with a configuration that you provide when you are using the directive. So here we are selecting the input on the span. We use the directive and we provide the configuration. Okay. So what we are doing with the headless component, okay, we are basically using those directives also everywhere. And for you, what it will mean creating headless component is you have this factory function, okay, that you will use inside your component. It will give you the stores. It will give you the directives to apply. It will give you a patch function to be able to change the props of the component. And it will give you an API where you can apply changes basically to the store itself. Okay, so you create a rating widget, and then you will be able to use the directives and the patch and everything inside your widget. Another pretty interesting feature of Agnos UI is the configuration mechanism. It's the last thing we are going to see. It's available with the slot in all the components. So the configuration is just something interesting that I think not a lot of library have. But basically, all the props on all the default slots, we are providing the configuration that is injected in every widget. Okay, and so, for example, here I'm creating a configuration and I'm modifying the default configuration, and this default configuration will be applied to any child component that is inside your application. So it means that, in fact, you can change all the default properties once in your application at the same time for all the pagination, for example. Okay. So it's pretty interesting. And the last thing I wanted to say is about the slot. So we have a lot of slots that you can use inside your application to provide configuration to your components, and you can even use the default slot inside your own your own headless component. And we use, of course, a lot of slot inside our Bootstrap component so that you can modify the slots. For example, here is for the alert. Okay, you can provide content with content projection, with the properties, and so on. Okay, and you have examples on how to configure the slots. So to conclude, because it's time, we think this library is a good fit for everyone. It's pretty flexible and efficient. We have ready-to-use widget and headless one. We are currently working on extending the widget list, of course. And what is cool is that if you contribute, it will benefit all the communities, not only Svelte. We hope to extend even the framework list we have. We think we bring value even for Bootstrap user because we have a lot of features that other libraries don't have. And we are on top of this, we are crazy about testing. So all the generated DOM between framework is compared. We test accessibility during our end-to-end test with Playwright. We intend to do event test on what is generating server side too. So you are open to contribute, to use it, to give us feedback. For example, we like current example of CSS, Tailwind with usage. So, okay, that's it. Thanks a lot. If you have any question.
Thank you so much, Florin. I noticed, well, of course, for the Svelte specific stuff, I noticed like actions, for example, you had to replicate the functionality with utilities in React and Angular. So what difficulties did you have in making the library agnostic rather than like Svelte specific? Because I've always been wondering this with, especially with the tan stack router stuff, tan stack tables stuff. What, how much effort does it take to additionally support all these different UI, well, frameworks, I guess, libraries?
Okay. So making the core and putting the process in place and the API takes the most effort. Okay. So as soon as you have coded the functionality in the core, the difficulties to add a new framework is to provide the different utils that we have seen. Okay. For example, the use directive in React or the AU use directive in Angular to apply the code. We can imagine that if we have another reactive system in another library, but we need to be able to plug our stores to this reactive system. Okay, so we need to provide those utils. But as soon as you have creating those utils, it's quite easy to use all the cores and create all the components. For example, when we have created the components in one framework, for example, we are starting by Angular or Svelte. It took us like 1 day to provide for any other framework with all the testing, all the things in place. All our end-to-end testing are run on all the browser, on free major browser, and all the framework. So all the tests are running for all the framework. So we are basically testing that the generated DOM is exactly the same. So we are doing DOM comparison. So as soon as it's pretty straightforward what we need to produce with the other framework in terms of them. So I must say the functionality, creating the core functionality is what takes time. We need to define what will be the slots for the component, what will be the functionality. But then to plug it into the framework, when you have the utils, it's quite easy.
Thank you. That sounds very interesting because it almost sounds like by forcing yourself to kind of like, well, not even forcing, it's like by having the constraint of needing to make it compatible with Svelte and Angular and React, you've sort of come up with a design that's more well thought out than maybe something like where if you made it Svelte specific, well, I can just use the existing slots. I can just use the actions as is with, and maybe it's not as portable. Maybe even like across major Svelte changes, like from 4 to 5, maybe it would be more less portable. But now that you have a design that's portable across even Angular and React, should be doable.
Indeed. The core framework is tested once. We have just unit test, but we are testing this once and it's used everywhere. So even if you are fixing bug in the core, but you are fixing bug for every framework. So you don't need to replicate the code you are doing. You don't need to think about this. That's pretty clever. Yeah.
All right. Any timeframes for where we might see maybe a release candidate? I see the version number is war
Yeah. Yes.
0.1 right now.
Um, so we currently have 2 milestones, I think, in GitHub that are available. So we see that in the first milestone we want to settle the API, and when we are doing control or uncontrolled component, how does it mean for this? So we will do it in the next version, and for the release for the let's say 1.0. We don't know. We are going to settle this first, and then we are thinking about it. We don't know how much component from NG Bootstrap we want to have before we are saying that it's a good candidate to be 1.0. But the goal for us is in short amount of time to have all our NG Bootstrap widgets plus a few other. So this is what we are working on. So I don't have any specific time frame, but we are many developers working on it already full time. So it should be fast.
Looks promising already. Yeah. So I look forward. I might even play with it after the stream.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thank you very much again to Florin Experia from Amadeus. And that was Agnos UI. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. So today, aside from the community showcase, we can have questions and answers for changes and just generic questions for Svelte as well. Okay asks, should I master basic JS before learning Svelte? So it's hard to say you can master a language. Especially I think that's probably overkill. One, it's overkill because even if the language specification was static, that's a lot of stuff to learn. That's a lot of ground to cover. And second, every year ECMAScript releases a new version update anyway, like 2024, 2025, and so on. So you're always playing catch up at some point, but you don't really need to know everything. You do want to know the very basics, variable management, control flow, state management will take care of you, for you. But a lot of the JavaScript you'll use in Svelte is very similar to what you use in vanilla JavaScript. So knowing vanilla JavaScript is an important foundation before you step into Svelte. That's why the Svelte tutorial, as good as it is, still makes the assumption that you know some level of JavaScript. It doesn't have to be really comprehensive, but you do need to know at least how to make things move around in terms of like program flow and variables. And I think that's the only questions, unless we have more from YouTube chat. I'll let a couple seconds pass by for the stream delay. I think there's like around 30 seconds of stream delay between me and the chat. In case you missed it earlier, we skimmed through the changes in the changelog for Svelte 5. A very quick overview is that since Next 57, we can nest CSS natively. We can use the where query natively as well. And since Next 62, you can export state and derived runes, although they will only be reactive across Svelte boundaries. So runes files, Svelte 4 files would also work. And finally, in Next 65, we have content editable, which you can mark without true, and just like in HTML, you can edit it. And that should be it. Okay. How often do you find careers in the ecosystem now, Rogue Yoshi? I am not the best person to ask for that because I have not been looking for swell jobs recently. I've been focusing on uh, learning a language, Japanese. But I think the space is growing, especially now. You can see recently NVIDIA released their new AI tool that's built with what is it, Gradio, and Gradio itself uses Svelte. So we have NVIDIA using indirectly Svelte as well, and of course we have places like Apple Music using Svelte in the web, etc., etc., etc. So I think it would depend regionally as well where you are, what the job market looks like. But I think compared to what we have, let's say 1 year ago, 2 years ago, the opportunities have expanded. I think that's everything. So thank you very much for joining this week's installment of This Week in Svelte. I've been your host, Martin Krishnato Putra, or Gregor Folzer, and I might see you next week. We'll see who will be hosting. And thank you very much.